Student life at Yale University saying she is deeply troubled by an incident on campus. Early Tuesday morning, a black graduate student fell asleep in a common room of a dorm while studying. A white student found Lola de Cienbola and told her she wasn't supposed to be sleeping there and called the police. Well, Cienbola was questioned and posted her encounter on Facebook Live. Here is part of it.
I need to go back to the 12th floor to finish writing my paper.
What's, you got your ID on you?
Yeah, I do.
All right, can we see that?
Why?
Because we got a police call for you.
And we need to make sure that you belong here.
Okay, let me open my apartment for you so that you can see that I belong here. I don't think there's a need for you to be here. I think you probably need to commit her to an institution. That's the only use you have for being here.
Once we verify that you're a resident here, then we'll be on our way.
Okay, great.
So are you a Yale student?
Of course I'm a Yale student. How else would I get in here?
You're a Yale student. I'm just asking.
Okay, well, you have three
So
other
the girl
cops
upstairs-
here.
Well, this is protocol, and I'm the supervisor, so it's going to be okay.
I know it's going to be okay. I know I'm not in trouble. My ancestors built this university. I know I'm not in
I don't know
trouble.
anything about that. I
Okay,
do know this,
well,
that we
I'm
got
not going to be
called busy.
harassed
This
because
isn't harassment, man.
that's exactly what it is.
It is harassment. After confirming Cienbola belonged in the dorm, police say they admonished a white student for calling them in the first place. I want to talk about this with Kierna Mayo. She is a former editor-in-chief of Ebony Magazine, CNN political commentator Bakari Sellers, and David Klinger, a former police officer who's author of Into the Kill. What people don't understand, it's harassment because just because someone calls the police on you, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And the idea of who do you think you are, calling the police on me and the cops come, I can call the police on anyone in the studio.
Absolutely.
And say, oh, someone is doing this, and make them show. Privilege isn't the word that I want to use. I'll figure out the word I want to use. What do you think?
It's so commonplace. This is what we don't really talk about because we only are addressing this when we are seeing it.
Right.
We have become so accustomed to a sense of not having place. That's why this young woman's response was really stand up, because what she didn't do was cower to a sense of I don't belong. Even when you're in your home, when you're on your porch, Dr. Gates, when you are in your own space, you're not safe from the white lens. You're not safe from some white citizen, right, presumably law-abiding, presumably, deciding that you are some kind of threat. It doesn't matter if you're a woman, if you're young, if you're old, it's just a state of blackness.
This is the word I was looking for. It's entitled.
It's entitled.
You're entitled to call the police on
Yes.
someone because you
Yes.
feel uncomfortable. You're entitled to do this because you think that you have some sort of authority in society that everybody should have the same authority in society.
It's unfortunate. We can't use terms like white privilege without a lot of white guilt and white angst.
Well, we need to get over that. I gave
the
a speech the other day
white
and I said we need to stop whispering when we say white and
We
black.
have
we need to say privilege. We just have to say those
because
things.
this is what privilege looks like.
Yeah.
It means I pick up the phone and call the cops on you really for no good reason other than
And then the cops
you've
come and
offended my
demand.
whiteness in this moment.
Right.
Yes.
So according to Yale Police, the statement, Bakari, Lola de computer, it said had a computer, books, and notebooks in addition to a blanket and a pillow on the couch. Why would anyone think she wasn't a student there? And I would imagine you have to scan your card or whatever to get into the dorm. Why would anyone think that?
Well, I mean, it's because of the color of her skin, Don. And so, I mean, we've been going through this round and round. I tell everyone that the United States of America, and this is one of the things I'm actually thankful for Donald Trump for, we're actually finally dealing with our original sin, which is the sin of racism in this country. And so this isn't just about Yale. This isn't just about Starbucks. This isn't just about Waffle House. This isn't just about all of these instances where you just simply cannot be black and comfortable in your own skin. Or Walmart, for example, where there was an off-duty police officer who beat someone and got sentenced to 5 years simply because they thought that he stole a tomato. And so you look at all of these instances and the reaction that happens simply because of the color of one's skin, but it all boils down to one thing. In this country, Don, African Americans for a long period of time have not gotten the benefit of their own humanity. And that's what you see. And so when you don't give people the benefit of their humanity, you don't treat them with dignity and respect, and you feel as if they can be tossed out with chattel and everything else. And so this young woman responded appropriately, and she did not put the police in a position where this could have been a worse incident than it was.
Just because you don't think someone should be there, because you don't think because you don't think someone else should be there, you call the police, and then the police demand something of you that they don't demand of everyone. David, you say police don't have to respond and investigate all calls, no matter if it's about a black person or white person. But do you understand what I'm saying about entitlement? Because someone else is uncomfortable, then you have to be put out, or you have to have an encounter with an authority that is unnecessary.
I do understand. I would simply say that it is not necessarily racial. One of the things we know from statistics is that members of the black community call the police more frequently than members of the white community, and typically it is a black person calling on another black person, for example. This case, I have no idea why this female student, the white female student, felt she needed to call the police. I don't get that. I think one of the problems we have, and one of the things that goes back to what you started saying, people think they need to get authority. They need to get the police there instead of just talking to people. Hey, what are you doing here? Well, I live in this same space as you do. Oh, I didn't realize that. What's your name? I'm Joe, this, that, and the other thing, and move on.
But she didn't have the opportunity to do that because the woman called the police. I understand that people...
No, I'm with you.
But people call the police on people usually who they're around. So it's proximity. If you live around black people, then chances are you're going to call the police on black people. And usually it's for someone who is actually committing a crime, David. And I hope you understand, just because someone else is uncomfortable with the way I look or my presence, that I have to have an encounter with a police officer because you are uncomfortable, because you don't recognize what everyone has been saying about privilege. Go on.
I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is that people generally in our society now, the first thing is let's call the cops, as opposed to let's talk to the person to find out what's going on. That was the point I was trying to make.
Particularly
across
on
racial
black
lines.
But
But are you saying
you're
saying the white student should have talked to the black student? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
But she didn't do that.
Absolutely.
But she didn't
exactly.
do that. Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But once the police show up, the police have an obligation to investigate.
Top official at Yale calling on students to work at making the university a more inclusive place after a white student called police on a black student, sleeping black student in a common area. Back with him now, Kieran Mayo, Bakari Sellers, and David Klinger. David, were you trying to get in? Or was it Bakari?
I was just trying to make the point that one of the issues that we have sometimes in our society is people are too quick to call the police instead of making their own inquiry. If it's a dangerous situation, of course, you need to call the police. But in a situation where someone is sleeping, it would strike me that if you're concerned, make that inquiry and then go from there. But once the police show up, they have an obligation to conduct an investigation.
Yeah.
Well, in theory, you call the police because there's a threat. So I wouldn't suggest that someone approach someone if you actually felt the police should be called. The question is,
absolutely.
why did this young woman feel the police should be called?
Well, we all know why. And she had done it, reportedly she had done it before with an African-American male student, the same sort of thing. She thought he didn't belong and didn't understand why he was on campus or why he was in the place. And I saw him, he spoke to another network earlier. But I mean, this is just, it's the latest in a string of racial incidents where police are called to handle a perceived threat. Police were called to the Waffle House in North California after a black man and his sister were arguing with employees. Here's what happened.
He's not supposed to be doing that. I'm glad I'm recording this. He's not supposed to be doing that. He's not supposed to be doing that.
Get your hands off me! Get your hands off me! Get your supervisor out here and get your hands off me! Get your supervisor out here and get your hands off me!
So, Bakari, we have this, and it was North Carolina, by the way, and you can see Anthony Wall's hands were in the air, and he admits that he took things too far while arguing with the employees, but says the chokehold was unnecessary, and police are investigating this. But this comes after Rialto, California, the Airbnb, it comes after Philadelphia, and so on. Go ahead, Bakari, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is why David's analysis was somewhat shallow and just casting the light on the fact that African Americans call the police on African Americans and white Americans call the police on white Americans. What it does, though, is it doesn't tell the full story. Well, what you actually did say was the fact that African Americans are more likely to call the police, and they call the police when they do on African Americans. And the reason that is because we live in segregated communities. But my point is that the reason that analysis is extremely shallow is because African Americans, when they come in contact with the police, are more likely to get an extensive use of force used upon them than white people. And so when you have this analysis and when you want to know why we have an issue with the contact that African Americans are having with police, is because usually these things are escalated to the point where African Americans
They're not
have a
usually,
use
sir.
of
The
force.
vast majority of times, police do not use any force, and you know that.
That's not what I said. I said, but what I did say, and what the fact
don't
is,
know that.
and you can research, but no. The fact is simply this: African Americans, when you have an excessive use of force, African Americans are more likely to be on the receiving end of that than their white colleagues. That's why we have to limit these number of contacts. That's all I'm saying. That's a fundamental fact. If you want to look at the statistics and call it what it is, that is what it is. That's why you have someone like this gentleman right now being choked. And I have no idea in what brochure you have a use of force where you choke someone.
Hey, David, I want you to respond to that, but I just have a couple seconds here.
Sure.
Can you please?
Yeah, briefly, the point I'm trying to make is that when police officers respond to a situation, they have an obligation to investigate, and your other guest is correct. They should not use excessive force. He and I are on the same page. And my only point was he said, your other guest said initially, that typically it escalates to excessive force when it is a black citizen, and I was simply objecting to that because that is categorically a false statement.
I just went to the Waffle House in Alabama, the Nordstrom's in Missouri, where 3 black teenagers were shopping for prom. Cops were called on them. 4 black women exited the home of the Airbnb, the one I mentioned. The women on the golf course, remember that? And it just,
Don,
yeah, I know.
We know these things happen.
Yeah, I know.
Okay?
Because we live them.
We live them.